Well, hey there, folks. It's Scott from Grey Ghost Gardening, and want to thank you for joining me today. It is a pleasant, only about 92 degrees out today. Not because of any major cool front or anything like that, but there's actually a thunderstorm cell up to the north of where I live. It's blocked some of the sun, and it's cooled temperatures off a little bit, so that's a nice change. For everybody else that isn't getting rain, which is pretty much most of Texas, I certainly hope you're making it through this drought as best you can. It's been tough, and I know places further west. My father-in-law runs cattle west of here about an hour, and it's bad, really bad. Everyone is rushing to sell their cattle because not only are the pastures dried up and hay is outrageously expensive if you can find it, stock tanks are drying up, springs are drying up, and so it's pretty much full-blown crisis mode right now in the ranching industry, the cattle industry here in Texas. And interestingly enough, that's kind of what I want to talk about just briefly here in the Grey Ghost Garden. You can see my Grey Ghost ever so diligently guarding our pecan tree back there. But if you remember, a couple of weeks ago, I posted here about my Lila avocado and how, as you can see, the tips of the leaves were curling up and browning and in some cases falling off. And you know, I was looking for questions, and at the time I moved the tree from a more sunny location where it was in full sun for a longer period of time to where it is sitting right now, which gets broken sun at the best and is really shaded pretty well. And I posted in that video, you know, if anybody had any thoughts or ideas or suggestions about what I should do and you know, maybe what I should be looking for, you know, please share it. And one of my subscribers in particular commented back, and it kind of got me going down the right path. So Fletchy Babe, thank you very much for bringing up the idea of chlorides or salts in the soil. Well, no salts in the soil. However, I'm in a suburb, right, northwest of Houston, and we get all of our water from the city of Houston. We're under one of these lovely things here in Texas, a municipal utility district. And so I use tap water to water my garden. And after doing some pretty extensive research, it appears that the water is indeed the culprit. What we have here in our water is some really high levels of chlorine. And you know, I should have thought about this and should have realized it. You can see how bad my grass looks, by the way, because I'm not running our sprinklers. You know, we've got a pool, and it's a chlorine pool, and you know, you have to put chlorine in right now in the heat of summer. You have to put chlorine in weekly because the chlorine evaporates out of the pool. And so, you know, I've always known that there's chlorine in the tap water. I guess I just didn't think that it was enough to be damaging plants. Well, once again, I was wrong. And come to find out that avocado plants are very susceptible to elevated levels of chlorine or any type of of chloride or salt in the soil. So I'm not worried about the soil. I've tested the soil, in fact, and it's perfectly fine. The water, however, does have higher levels of chlorine. And so, how do I fix this, right? I don't have a rainwater collection system coming off of my roof. I should, but right now it wouldn't matter anyways because we haven't had rain in months, any measurable rain in months. And so even if I had rainwater collection, I would be relying on my tap water. And so instead now, what I'm doing, you can see here over my shoulder, I'm gone swimming pool on it. And so this is a lesson for anyone who maybe in particular, if they're engaged in container gardening and you're wondering why is the foliage curling up and browning up and dying? Probably one of three things, right? Either you're underwatering, which I knew wasn't the case with my avocado tree. There is some type of a salt or a chloride in the soil, which would then need to be leached out. Or three, there's something in your water. And in my case, it was elevated levels of chlorine in the water. And so, not all my plants are affected, right? I mean, even, my fig trees are doing great. I mean, look at that Santa Rita. I mean, it's doing phenomenal. Even the Verdino del Nord, which isn't growing quite as strongly, is nonetheless still growing. So, not all the plants are equally impacted. But again, based on some research that I did and actually some research that my dad helped me out with, avocado trees are very susceptible. So let me show you what I've got going on here. It's a really complicated solution. Not really. All right, so I'm container gardening. So why not store some water in some of my containers? And that's exactly what I've done here. I'm not going to use this, at least not right now. I'm not going to use this on all my plants, but I'm going to use this certainly on plants that are appearing to be more sensitive. And so what I've done is I've got my big tubs here that I normally use for container gardening, that I make into wicking tubs and my potato tubs and this kind of stuff. And now Cosmo's going to have a little drink maybe. And so these are roughly 25 gallons, 25 gallons, something like that. And so right now I've got two of them filled up, and chlorine is lighter than air, actually, and so it will evaporate out of here fairly quickly, within a day or two. Whatever chlorine that was in the tap water will be gone. And so then all I'm going to do is fill my watering bucket up, my water bucket up, and when I go water my avocado trees, when I go water my blueberries, because my blueberries are starting to show some of the same things. And so I'm just going to use this water, and then I will replace it as I water down in each of these tubs, or use up the water that's in each of these tubs. And so, my blackberries that are growing here, my grapes don't seem to be impacted. My tomatoes, I'm curious if they have struggled, the couple that I've got that are, salvaged transplants. I'm curious to see or to know if they have struggled a little bit because you can see some of the foliage there on the bottom has died off. And so I'm curious if some of them are more sensitive to the elevated levels of chlorine in the water. So I just felt like this was something worth sharing, especially if you're a beginning gardener and you're container gardening. You're using containers. If the ends of the leaves on your foliage and whatever plant are drying up, browning up, curling up, it's going to be one of three things, right? Either you're not watering enough, and you can stick your finger down into the container, a couple of inches, and if it's wet or moist down that deep, you're still probably all right, so that's likely not the culprit. Now, if it's bone dry and you can't even get your finger in there, there's your first issue. 2, there is something in the soil. You should use, especially for container gardening, you should use the highest quality soil that you can afford. You don't want to dig up soil out of your regular garden. You need potting mix. You can make your own potting mix. There's lots of YouTube videos about people making potting mix. If you go back and watch some of my earlier videos, I'm showing you how I put together various potting mixes for potatoes and carrots and various other things. It needs to be light and fluffy and have great drainage and this kind of stuff. You also need to be careful then what kind of fertilizer you're putting into the soil and what you're amending the soil with, because in a container gardening situation, you're going to be putting some type of food into the container, probably on a monthly basis, depending on what it is you're growing, maybe even a little bit more frequently than that, but at least on a monthly basis, because they don't have anywhere else to get the food from or the nutrients from, and so you want to be sure you're using something that's organic. You want to be sure that it's reputable and high quality and isn't going to have a bunch of salts or chlorides that you end up inadvertently contaminating your soil with. Once you can check those 2 things off the list, then your third option is to look at your water. And most people, especially if you're on municipal water of some sort, you can pull up a water report for, usually, at least here where I live, by zip code we can, and you can look at the chemical composition of the water and what is in there. And so I was able to look up chlorine. Normally they say that tap water is supposed to have, I think, 4 parts per million of chlorine. And why do they put chlorine in the water? Because it's a very effective disinfectant, right? It'll knock out a lot of things that could make people sick, potentially, which is why when the water mains or the waters, when we have floods and that kind of stuff, and our water supply system gets contaminated, that's why we go on boil water notices, because when you boil the water, you kill things. Well, boiling water could also eliminate or remove the chlorine that's in there, and do it pretty quickly, within 10 or 15 minutes. But now you're wasting other energy, electricity or gas or whatever you're using to boil the water. If you will just put water in a container and set it out, the chlorine will naturally evaporate up out of that container. You can even just put water in a jug and put it in your refrigerator inside, if you're worried about drinking your tap water now, and within 24 hours that chlorine is going to be gone. The warmer it is, the faster the chlorine is going to evaporate. That's why we go through more chlorine in the pool, for example, in the summer than we do in the winter, because of the temperatures. So I've now started filling up these 2 big tubs, and if I decide that I'm getting really good results and I'm seeing a lot of significant improvement in the overall health of the plants that I'm using the water, then I'll add a few more tubs and use it for more of my watering. But right now, to start with, we're going to hit Lila, my avocado tree. I'm going to get my blueberries. I'm even going to get Joey, even though I think Joey has hardened off enough now. And when I say Joey, it's a Joey avocado and it's a Lila avocado, but I call them Lila and Joey. Joey has hardened off enough now that he's pretty tough, and doesn't seem too phased or too affected by it. But anyways, so this is what my plan is moving forward, and so this is then the lesson for you all. Are you watering enough, right? What is in your soil? What is in your water? Especially if you're on municipal water. There's going to be chlorine in there, I guarantee it. Is it an elevated level of chlorine? Is it an okay level of chlorine? Only a water test is going to tell that for sure, or if there's already a test that exists that you can access and look at to see what the chlorine level is. But even people that are on well water, in certain parts of the country, there's varying levels of chlorides and other things, salts essentially, that are in the water. For example, one of our river systems, we don't have a whole lot of really big rivers, but one of our more significant rivers is called the Colorado River, and it comes from way up in kind of north central Texas, flows all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico, goes into the Gulf around Matagorda. But all of that watershed, there are very high levels of chloride, of salt in the water. And so that water, it's not salt, it's not like salt water like at the beach or the Gulf or the ocean or anything like that, but there are significant levels of salts in that water. And so if you're getting water from that source, you're going to have elevated levels of chlorides or salts. And that could be impacting or affecting negatively whatever it is you're trying to grow. So something to think about. It's another little piece of knowledge to put under your hat and stick in the back of your head. But I just wanted to share that quick so that maybe somebody else is struggling with this, and it could be as simple a fix. Put your bucket of water out on the back patio, put it on the balcony if you live in an apartment and you've just got a couple of little containers with some tomatoes or peppers or whatever else. Let it sit there for 24 hours, probably not even that long if it's outside and warm, and that chlorine will be gone. You don't need to go buy anything. You don't need to boil it. You don't need to do anything else. Let Mother Nature take care of it, and then use it for watering whatever plants you have. All right? If you found any benefit from this, if this helped you in any ways, love to hear it in the comments below. Would be thrilled to death if you would hit the like button for me, and would be really, really honored if you would consider subscribing and following along as I run into problems and we all continue to explore this fascinating stuff that we call gardening and growing our own food. So y'all have a great day. I hope, if you're watching, I hope you're in one of the areas that's getting some of the rain. I hope you're not on the East Coast where they had all the flooding. And if you are, I hope you're safe and everybody is okay. But again, thanks for being here with us, and we look forward to having you join us again here in the garden. Bye.